Good afternoon, everyone. And after a very engaging, enriching discussion, we are almost towards the end of this two-day conference. I invite here on the panel today for our concluding session, we have all the eminent chairs from the 4 thematic sessions who and Mr. Asif, who would be presenting the key recommendations that have been emanating from the thematic sessions. And then we have 3 panelists, Dr. Zoya Ali Rizvi, Shri Saurabh Rishi, and Mr. Parul Soni, who would be giving the concluding address on how we can take this action plan forward. With some of our panelists, Mrs. Indra Chakravarti is running late, but she'll join us in 10-15 minutes. And Dr. Zoya Ali Rizvi would also join us around 2:45. The format of the session would be that we will lead we will have the recommendations from the 4 sessions, thematic sessions. And for that, I will introduce the chair, Mrs. Preeti Soodhan. We have already introduced all the chairs yesterday, but Ms. Preeti Soodhan is the former Secretary, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. And she was also responsible for 2 flagship programs of the country, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and Ayushman Bharat. We have Dr. Indra Chakravarti, Padma Shri and Public Health Specialist, who would be joining us soon. Dr. Sanjay Bhatt, who is a professor, Delhi School of Social Work, University of Delhi, and Dr. Renu Gulwalkar, who joins us online, who is the Director General, Youth and Social Inclusion, Gender Health. So over to you, Preeti ma'am, to take the thematic recommendations from the thematic sessions forward.
My greetings to the eminent chairs who are with me virtually and on the dais. Yesterday we had very illuminating sessions chaired by these eminent experts. We have actually a very, I would say, rich national plan in the offing. And as you proceed with this session, it will come to light that I think that whatever recommendations that we have made, they should be practical and implementable, number one. Secondly, they should also have a timeline. So when we are making the action plan, I suggest that let's have a timeline so that the recommendations can be reviewed as to how we have implemented them. So I have been given the mandate to speak out my recommendations of my group, my panel. It was headed by very eminent experts. And our group was ensuring mental health and well-being for girls. So let me just summarize the session recommendations. First and foremost, I'd like to say that mental health and well-being are very intricately correlated. So therefore, when we are talking about mental health, we are having the framework of well-being in mind. That's number one. So the first recommendation was that delivery of mental health services should be in mission mode with dedicated, adequate, and earmarked budget. Now, this is important because you may have an action plan, but you don't have the budget, then that makes it difficult. And when we are talking of budget, in my understanding, it's budget of the central government, state, local bodies, and also of CSR budget. So it's all to be put together. And that'll what will make the difference. I won't go into numbers. Why? Because you see, you may say I need 20,000 crores for in the next 3 years. Do we have the absorption capacity? That is the point. So therefore, you need to earmark your activities, your interventions, the stakeholders, the actors, and then ensure that your action plan is actually implemented. Next was that second recommendation is that entire spectrum of healthcare needs to be focused on capacities at primary level, defining clear referral pathways, infrastructure and human resource at secondary and tertiary level, need of space for contextual healthcare. Because yesterday one of the panelists had very rightly raised that, you know, the trauma or the I would say the pressures of, say, Northeast or of tribal areas, because it may be different. So the contextual need of healthcare, you know, should also be taken into account. And I think it's very important, especially in the context of mental health that we are talking about. And then use of technology. Sometimes, you know, we feel that, say, a portal is enough, but thankfully with technology you have actually human interface also possible. So chat, bots, you know, self-assisted help interventions, then mobiles, you know, your helpline, mobile helpline. I during the first wave of COVID, Nimhans very quickly put up a mental health helpline for people, you know, in isolation and for different age groups, and also for, say, HIV affected people, for, say, transgenders, in all languages of the country. And that really, really helped. So next is sensitizing panchayats, because groundwork, the work that you do at the ground is very important. We had a very able panelist on this group who actually works with children, with adolescents, with girls and boys. So the point that he made was that, you know, it's important to do groundwork. And we had Mr. Shishadri, former director of Nimhans, who also made a point that sensitizing panchayats is very important, because you see, one is this, you have to address stigma, you have to recognize a mental health issue, you have to create support groups, and you have to have an ecosystem for safe places for girls and women to speak. And this can be done only at the ground level, and gradually, you know, that becomes a norm or a habit or a tradition. My personal experience in Beti Bachao was that special Gram Sabhas held on the theme really sort of created awareness, and also it helped to, you know, people own up and the whole program. And also that you must have local champions. So champions at the village level, champions within the family also, who stand up for, you know, girls' rights, for them to speak up, for them to be treated equally, for them to be able to air their grievances. Because if communication lines are open, then you see mental health issues get resolved through dialogue and support, consequent support. And the next recommendation was that transdisciplinary framework, multi-sectoral interventions are needed. And there is, I mean, I'm sure all of you know that, and it's so important. So if I talk from the government side, then Women and Child Development Ministry, Rural Development, Panchayati Raj, you know, Education Department, Health Department, and I would even say, you know, the way infrastructure is created, all of them has to create an ecosystem of support. Then mainstreaming emotional learning, again, a very important, I would say, recommendation in school curriculum. So it's subtly, I remember when we were still in school, we used to have moral science. You know, it very subtly and without our knowing created and enhanced our value systems. We don't have it anymore. So we should actually, and this health and wellness ambassadors at school under Ayushman Bharat is such a step forward. But I think more work and strengthening it, and because of COVID, it has sort of, because of the online mode of education, the whole thing has really not taken off. It needs to take off now. Then you must have a policy for adolescent girls. We keep talking about girls to girls. We have to talk about gender to boys. We also have to allow the boys to actually speak. The whole thing of masculinity, that "Arey, ye to bada sakhat aadmi hai," that kind of thing has to go. After all, they are also humans. They need to emote, they need to communicate. So I think that policy is also required. And it's important that they are able to understand, stand up for what is right in their family, in the context of girls and women. Then also, later on, sensitive, and I would say boys who understand gender and their own emotive needs also will actually play a more significant role in communities and institutions. Then strengthening the positive to tackle the challenges. It was a very interesting recommendation made by one of the panelists. She said that, we sometimes we keep talking about this is not right, this is not right. We don't talk about what strengths we have, because if we hone in those strengths, we are able to meet the challenges better. So one of the examples that she gave was that a peer supported ecosystem for mental health care delivery, the ashas working on the ground, or the Anganwadi teachers working, or anybody who's doing work in mental health field, the doctors or the counselors, if they have a peer support, or they have an ecosystem to strengthen this positive, they'll do better, they'll be more encouraged. Of course, there was also a recommendation to have a separate ASHA for recognizing mental health issues. Let me tell you that under, again, the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, one of the 12 packages is again mental health. It should take up. Karnataka is one state that has done well in that. So the self-help groups, youth clubs, dedicated ASHA worker, local trained volunteer, these are some of the recommendations to make this recommendation possible. Then partnering with government on health and wellness ambassadors, not only in schools, because for the government has mandated this in schools, it should also be in communities, creating local champions, expanding network of peer educators, as we have under RKSK. I'm sure that Zoa will talk about that later. So creating online modules under IGOT for community volunteers, special modules on parenting, because everything begins in families. So how do we sort of tell the parents that talking about mental health issues is not, to it has to be articulated, it has to be discussed, and it's an important issue, especially with COVID, the isolation, children not going to school, children not having physical activities, how important, and online bullying at times, so much of time spent on phone and in front of the computer. So that all is important. Then creating a toolkit for psychosocial first aid. That's a very interesting recommendation. I hope it comes into being. Then strengthening government interventions with feedback. So for Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, when we thought that how do we do audit, so we have actually under that made mandate for social audit through the rural development network of self-help groups. So because you see, when the local community, especially the women, who I think more of the family, sorry, I'm being partial, but if they do the social audit of the health and wellness centers of preventive promotive health, certainly there will be a sense of belonging, and they'll also want to have a stake in its functioning. Then giving visibility in political agenda for girls facing multiple vulnerabilities and severe exclusion, such as migrant girls, girls who've been trafficked, and etc. Then all of the above recommendations, one thing I want to say is that it is basically to create a system of self-esteem, self-worth within homes, within communities, within institutions, with voices heard, opportunity to meet their full potential and be part of decision making of their own destinies. So thank you. And now this was our group. Now I invite Dr. Renu. She is online to kindly talk about her group. Dr. Renu is Director, Gender, Youth and Social Inclusion and Gender Health. So welcome, Dr. Renu.
Thank you, Preeti ji, and hello, everyone. So our group was discussing eliminating gender-based violence in all its form. We had an excellent panel yesterday with Ms. Nayana Chaudhary, Dr. Karnika Seth, Shalini Kamath, Krista Zimmerman, and Shanu Somvanshi. Today, I'm presenting all the recommendations that this group forwarded yesterday, and it's a long list, more than 20 recommendations, I guess. So we've already shared the written recommendations with Plan team. So I'm not going to go over the entire list. But what I've done is that I've categorized these recommendations into 4 broad categories, and I'll just go through those. The first is agency level recommendations. So the group felt that it's important to listen to adolescents and involve them in designing solutions, following the ethos, nothing about us without us. So it's important to listen to adolescent girls and engage them in co-creation, co-designing of interventions which are related to the gender-based violence they face. A panelist also recommended that instead of using protection, we should talk about empowerment approaches and involving survivors of gender-based violence in strategy design responses needed for contextualizing interventions. And one of the panelists also recommended that it would be good to have a support group, a support network of GBV survivors, which can create a mutual self-help among the group and use this group to leverage awareness generation and convergence of various GBV services. So these were the recommendations at the agency level. The second set of recommendations are the societal level recommendations. And the first and foremost was about looking inward, looking at ourselves and the kind of gender stereotypes that we follow in our own lives. And again, believing that gender transformative change begins from us. So what each one of us can do in our own personal space and in our societies to challenge and call out any form of violence against women and girls or others. And the group also said that engaging men and boys for challenging negative notions of masculinity and gender norms, this is very important. And Preeti ji also pointed out right now that it is important to talk to men and boys and engage them in these conversations. And they too can be, champions of gender transformative change and violence prevention. And also about infrastructure support for survivors and something that the communities can come together to provide that support. At the organizational and level, there are 2 recommendations. And when I'm saying organizational level, this is for organizations, NGOs, INGOs, CBOs who are implementing, interventions on gender-based violence. So one is that to recognize that whenever we plan or implement an intervention to prevent gender-based violence, we are also addressing the underlying causes which are rooted in gender power dynamics. And when we challenge these gender power dynamics and patriarchal norms, it also has a potential to lead to unintended harm and backlash. Sometimes the backlash on the survivors or the women and girls who are attending these, women's economic empowerment sessions, for example. And I also wanted to quote that there are a lot of conflicting evidence that we are seeing in the recent years, where we see that some of the women's economic empowerment interventions have actually reported a rise in intimate partner violence. Again, pointing back to the fact that when the gender power dynamics is challenged, it has that tendency for unintended harm and backlash. And again, I'm saying these are conflicting evidence. We have some reports which suggest this, but we have other research which suggests that it actually leads to women getting more empowered and being able to say no to violence. So in that backdrop and context, we feel that any gender-based violence intervention must do a rapid risk assessment to understand the social, cultural, religious, and political drivers of GBV and the enablers and disenablers in the ecosystem. And the findings of this risk assessment should inform a contextualized do no harm framework for each intervention, and so that every project has a detailed safety plan and mitigation strategy to protect all project participants, especially women and girls. And the other recommendation for organizations is that we need to have an intentional lens on addressing gender-based violence faced by marginalized and vulnerable groups, especially women and girls living with disability, living with HIV, from the LGBTQ group, Dalit and Adivasi groups, and other socially marginalized groups. These are also the groups which face a heightened risk and vulnerability to gender-based violence. And because of the stigma and discrimination they face, there is also reduced access to services. So we need an intentional lens on this group. And finally, the policy and system strengthening related recommendations. So this is a long list, but I'll try and speak about the most important ones. So one, that the issue of gender-based violence needs to be brought to focus as an important issue. So we need to bring up GBV as upfront and central, with or without the pandemic. So yesterday we discussed about GBV in the context of COVID-19, but we also know that it's always been there in the society. COVID-19 just brought it up even more central. And only then we will be able to leverage all stakeholder support and resources. One of the important observation is also, like, there are so many things we can do to bring the issue of GBV up front and central. One of the things that we can do, for example, in conferences, keeping the issues and topics and discussions on GBV as the first or middle sessions rather than the last one, where everyone is looking at their watch and they just want to go. So I think, so thank you, Preeti ji, for asking the GBV group to present the recommendations first. The other policy and system strengthening recommendation is the need for multi-sectoral approach and not a siloed approach, which sits only with the Ministry of WCD. We would want the GBV multi-sectoral approach to be a part of the convergence model and discussion with other ministries, for example, law enforcement, judiciary, child welfare, economic empowerment, labor welfare, etc. And the third system policy level recommendation is, and this is, I think, a big one, all our panelists felt that this is a very important piece around coordination. We all know that a lot of organizations, CBOs, national NGOs, international NGOs, everyone is doing some piecemeal work around GBV. But I think, and the group also felt that for effective, sustainable, long-term intervention, coordination among all these actors is required, where the government and youth network, feminist groups, and all stakeholders, organizations can come together, discuss what strengths they are bringing into this space, what is their niche area, and then try and bring all of this together in one comprehensive, survivor-centric, multi-sectoral intervention, which is coordinated through central, mechanisms. And we had a specialist on cyber law, cyber security, Dr. Karnika Seth. She had specific set of recommendations, especially in the light of increased cyber stalking, cyberbullying, digital space violence against women. And two of the key recommendations for the digital and cyberspace is that there is a new national cybersecurity policy, and she recommends that this policy needs to have a clear focus on online and cyberspace gender-based violence. And another recommendation is around sensitization. So there is a lot of work that we need to do with the law enforcement agencies who still look at crime against women as something tangible, something which is visible. So many a times when women and girls face violence online and they go to complain, the law enforcement agencies are not able to understand how this is actually a violence, a gender-based violence. So that sensitization with the law enforcement agencies and with all the stakeholders to make them understand that any violence which is happening on the cyberspace, digital space, online space is also causing a tremendous amount of trauma for the survivor, and looking at those spaces for capacity building and sensitization with different stakeholders. And finally, all these set of recommendations, they need to have a lens of sustainability, because gender-based violence requires time. It's a long-term consistent effort, and all the efforts need to have a sustainability lens. So not looking at project-based interventions, but looking at the long-term sustainable plan for gender-based violence elimination. Thank you, Preeti ji, back to you.
Thank you very much. So good to have Dr. Indra Chakravarti. She is coming directly from Calcutta. And good to have you, Zoa. She is the one who will actually implement whatever recommendations are being made. So she is the most important here. Now I request Dr. Sanjay Bhatt, Professor, Delhi School of Social Work, University of Delhi, to kindly summarize the recommendations of his group.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have a thematic group to discuss the towards inclusive and quality education for girls. The 6 panelists coming from different fields, from government, from private, from NGO. They have, in fact, created a lot of social capital for us in terms of their recommendations. The earlier group has 21 recommendations. We have 34 recommendations. So for the, I quickly tried to summarize them, and just 10 powerful recommendations we would like to present before you on behalf of the group. The girl education needs to become a priority. We need to ensure every girl gets the education she deserves. Political will is to be asked and demonstrated in proactive policies. It is important to ensure that funding and support continue for girls' education system, and government can harness public-private partnership to supply needed technology and resources. We need to create new bridges which have been broken during the COVID period. Family is most important social institution for education, and there is a need to focus on family-specific programs and family engaging schemes which will enable the opportunities for girls' participation in education. There is need to stress on foundational skill of literacy and numeracy and early learning. There is need to develop specific toolkits which is near zero cost methodology, especially for a learner from 0 to grade 3 in foundational literacy and numeracy, which is possible in less than 5 months. Effective and joyful learning, paired and group work, especially in the foundation years, will make more inclusive education. The new education policy and Nipun Bharat are designed to meet the target of SDG 4 before time. It is time to focus on creating a safety net, a limited set of learning objectives organized for each grade and subject, not the total curriculum, just the safe net that every teacher should ensure every student knows. There is a need to focus professional development on gender responsive pedagogies so that teaching practices are gender responsive, and that the curriculum not only removes gender biases, but also share more female role models and inspire girls. It is important to take care of social well-being and emotional health and safety issues at school. appropriate programs may be devised. Under new national education policy, we need to translate the provision of school complex as early as possible. A gender transformative approach, which goes beyond addressing symptoms to explicitly tackling the root cause of gender inequality, particularly unequal gender power relation, discriminatory social norms and system, structure, policies and practices. A quality education is more than just learning. It is about feeding aspirations, nurturing confidence, building self-efficacy, spiritual, social and emotional development, and more. We need to make these objectives central. To ensure all these objectives are being met, articulation is not adequate. We need better and time-bound targets, short-term goals, checking on outcomes, monitoring, accountability, and transparency. For this, focus need to shift from accountability on syllabus completion to real and measurable outcomes on the broader goals of education with a data and evidence-driven approaches. Teachers' role and skills are irreplaceable. Leadership, financial and material resources for teachers are necessary to make sure that quality of teaching continues during school closure. Guiding and mentoring teachers in curriculum must be given importance, and teachers must be given only role of educator, education responsibility, not other things. Let us ask this from government to ensure that teachers are not engaged in other than educational activities. Digital education must be seen positively. E-learning solutions are only effective for teachers, students, families with adequate electricity, internet connectivity, computers, tablets, and physical spaces. More traditional media such as print, television, phone, radio can offer more Bible base, especially for poorest community, so should not be deleted from the space. Parental engagement is important to facilitate homeschooling. Parents should be supported with resources to provide them guidance to ensure basic and continued education services. Travel to remote communities can be exempt from travel restrictions. The community engagement also looked at from different angle in post-COVID era. The creation of a school environment in post-COVID is essential. New initiatives should be tried out. Like cycle helps the girl child in education, we should look at more such a scheme that will encourage girls. Slogans after Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, we should add some more slogans like Beti Aage Badhao shall be used to encourage girls and society as a whole. Such slogans do make an impact. And finally, last, that Plan India should visit its national charter developed in 2016. It is 5 years now, and post-COVID situation must include the post-COVID commitment in this charter. Rest, I'm not going to make them, but it will be available with the plan. Thank you very much, and thank you the group which has created such a wonderful recommendation. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt, for very sound recommendations. Now I request Dr. Indra Chakravarti, Padma Shri and Public Health Specialist, to sum up her recommendations.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry for joining a little late. Please excuse me. I will be give the thematics, the recommendations of the thematics scheme on advancing gender equity in food security and nutrition for all girls. I first of all would like to thank all the experts who spoke in this group and also the excellent comments that came from the participants. I think we had more than nearly 620 participants who were there, who joined us in this whole process. So I'm very grateful to each one of them and also the experts who spoke very eloquently. I don't know whether others have a copy of the recommendation, but I'm going to club a couple of them together so that I'm not going by the sequence that was given. I think one of the things that was very important was that along with nutrition, balanced diet and balanced food intake will be essential because post-COVID, it was shown that 22% of the food deprivation globally was in this country, and women were most affected. So therefore, I think along with nutrition, the recommendation was that also balanced diet, along with staples, non-staples also need to be looked into, because some of our major health and nutrition problems are like anemia, which actually is not based on the balanced diet system. So that was one of the main recommendations on the food as well as the nutrition balance. Both need to be looked into. The second, and I think which most of the speakers highlighted, was that we need proper community participation and therefore proper awareness generation. So that was one of the main issues, that we must have community participation along with proper information communication being together. And because of that, I think the required communication strategies should be developed, highlighting the importance of gender in the communication strategy. And along with that also, it was also mentioned that awareness in villages need to be designed with a proper, in a way so that the impact-driven programs can reach the targets. So this was another very important issue that came out. Along with it, it was also very important that the caregivers, the frontline workers, like the ICDS systems, who are already overburdened and are not trained regularly, need to be built properly so that they can give proper capacity and training to the people when needed. So therefore, communication participation, along with giving proper strategies of how to do the information, education, communication to ensure community participation, also strengthening the frontline workers' strength to do this properly, are all rolled in one. So all these were kind of a thing which needs to be packaged, and I think plan can do it very well. Packaging all these communication along with developing proper strategies, along with developing the strength of the frontline workers. So all these are possibly a very important issue that should be taken up. The third thing that was very important was that a comprehensive approach needs to be developed so that all nutrition supportive sectors are also made a partner, like the WASH, the agriculture, the food safety. All these are very essential partners of nutrition and health. Therefore, if you leave them out, it'll be very difficult to overcome undernutrition and also other serious health problems, for example, like diarrhea, which is a waterborne disease. So we have to look into the support systems which encourage better nutrition, encourage better health. The fourth thing was that we already invested in a lot of projects. And after the project is over, sometimes this investment goes a waste. Therefore, reinvestment in what has already been done should be harvested back. And because of that, where investment has already been done, reinvestment is essential on a very targeted approach. And therefore, once for this, what we need to do is possibly encourage more social and technical capital to be built around the at-risk communities so that they get the benefit who has already been identified by the first stage. So in the second stage, this should be done, and also to enable the community to reinvest in their social and technical capital. So this whole process of reinvestment targeting into the more development, both socially and technically, of the community is something very important. This will ensure sustainability of the entire process. Once it is done, the sustainability can be very easily done. And I think PLAN has already built some very excellent branded programs on this. So therefore, reinvestment in those areas, especially to social technical sectors, will be, I think, possibly an extremely important and a positive, and possibly fast track many of the things that has not happened so far. It will fast track many developments. The fifth thing that was given was that already the ICDS system is overburdened and the people are not trained, and therefore, as I already mentioned, some support is essential to be given to them, and we must think of how ICDS system can be further strengthened. For the midday meal, there was a recommendation that whether it could be extended to class 10 students as well, because we stop it earlier. So whether that can be done. Though we mentioned just now that the ICDS is already overburdened, but I think there was another recommendation that without the dropout girls who are actually, they fall into a gap because they are not school going, neither they are not school going. So they are dropouts. So quite often the dropout girls are in a gap. They are supported by neither. So whether ICDS could take up the dropout girls under their wings, though it's by giving them rations or giving them awareness, is something which possibly, I mean, ICDS or any other system, which could possibly take on these girls would be something I think which would be very, very important. Lastly, I think, not last, I think two more. One thing is that I think the most unreached should be reached. And that can be done very well in the reinvestment plan. But even then, even new places, unreached should be reached. And lastly, I think we should not leave the men behind, though it's a gender-based thing. I think in the entire theme of mainstreaming, food security, giving them impact-driven programs, men have to be taken into confidence because it is men will have to not only support women, will have to support themselves as well. So men need to be inculcating into their efforts in the whole process. Along in the, though it's a gender, we are talking of strengthening the women's activities, but men need to be there to strengthen the whole process. I think this is the recommendations. I've clubbed quite a few, but I think that's all the recommendation from the sector. Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you very much, Dr. Chakravarti, for that very articulate recommendations. So we've heard 4 thematic groups now, and you may notice that some of the recommendations got repeated. We saw an overlap. And I think that's a very clear indicator of the critical gaps in mental health issues. So it's a good thing that we saw that overlap, because that's what is critical. That's what we need to work on. And of course, it's evident that mental health issues need multi-sectoral, transdisciplinary approach. Building capacities of human resource infrastructure, both at institutional and community level, is the key. Creating an ecosystem for support, articulation, communication is important. And finally, mainstreaming mental health is a pressing need. Now I hand over to you for the next sub group of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So I think there were quite comprehensive recommendations there, which takes us to the last session, last but not the least, on how do we concretize these recommendations into concrete action plans. So from here, we go to the session on towards a national action plan for building back better with girls. We have 3 experts on the panel, all of whom could suggest some very concrete ways of how we can look at implementing these recommendations. We have Dr. Zoya Ali Rizvi, who is a Deputy Commissioner, Adolescent Health, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Dr. Rizvi is a meritorious and hardworking doctor and has vast experience of working in government health sector, looking specifically at promotive and preventive health care of adolescents in facilities, schools, and communities. She looks after the newly launched School Health and Awareness Program under Ayushman Bharat to improve the health-seeking behavior and knowledge. We also have Shri Saurabh Rishi. Saurabh, who is a senior specialist in NITI Aayog. Saurabh Rishi is a senior specialist joint advisor in the Data and Strategy Division of the Aspirational Districts Program at NITI Aayog. He is responsible for monitoring and ranking of districts based on KPIs related to health and nutrition, education, agriculture and water resources, financial inclusion, and skill development and basic infrastructure. The third panelist is Mr. Parul Soni, founder and global managing partner, Think Through Consulting. Mr. Soni has been instrumental in providing strategic leadership to large development programs at country and regional levels with international and national organizations. With over 24 years of experience, he has driven major programs in areas of cross-sectoral partnerships and institutional networks, inclusive community participation, social accountability, social justice, using his rich and extensive experience in social development and corporate social responsibility. So over to you, ma'am, and the panelists.
So thank you. And now I request Dr. Zoya Ali Rizvi, Deputy Commissioner, Adolescent Health in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, to show us how we move ahead towards the action plan.
Afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be on the same dais as Ma'am Preeti is here, and Ma'am Upma Chaudhary, Ma'am is also here. So it's great to be on great minds. So I beg my apologies if I'm repeating something which has already been said earlier. But I would just start by just commenting on the fact that COVID-19 pandemic has changed the entire way we look at any program implementation or policy making. And this has already deepened whatever pre-existing vulnerabilities, inequalities which were there earlier have been deepened, whether it is health, whether it is education, social sector, even political, everything has been affected. And also to stress that the most affected have been the women and girls. You all may be aware that as per the UNESCO data, about 180 crore school children across the world have missed school due to COVID lockdown. And in India also, we're looking at about 30 crore children who have been missing school due to the pandemic situation and school closures. So this has got multi-sectoral impact, whether it is education, whether it is food, nutrition, which was already discussed, whether it is emotional impact, even I would say go ahead and say even affect that whatever has taken effect, whether it is climate change, whether disaster, women and girls have always been at the receiving end. If we just look at education also, whether it is the what has led to increased number of girls who have dropped out, even those girls who had access to systems to join online schools had lesser resources as compared to the male counterparts. They ended up doing more household work, more unpaid work. For food and nutrition has already been discussed that, of course, there was unequal access to resources, to nutrition. There was limited decision-making by girls, limited agency. And this has, of course, put the women, I think, further back in the education status. Emotion, which Preeti ma'am has already discussed, is very important. It is one of the most critical things which we are looking at in the adolescent health program. Is the I think it's like a mental health crisis which we are facing for both adolescent boys and girls, more so for girls, because there has been the tremendous psychosocial stress which they have been facing due to loss of a dear one, even themselves getting infected with COVID. Second also is isolation from friends, family, lack of socialization which they have been affected. Loss of learning itself has been leading to emotional stress for them. And now increasingly more and more issues of cyber crime are coming up, whether it is cyberbullying, whether it is trolling. So all issues are adding for increased stress for our young adolescent girls and young women. And impact of this pandemic has been much more for the most marginalized among these women, whether it is the poorest quintile, whether it is the girls with disabilities, whether it is the ones who are in the remotest, hard to reach areas, or the ones who belong to the marginalized caste, whether it is Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, or the OBC. So these girls have borne the brunt the most. But on the other side, we know that India is a signatory for the Sustainable Development Goals. And we also know that if we are attempting to access, whether we are trying to ensure access to services or resources for women and girls, is really important. It is not just important for economic development, but also it will be instrumental in creating a more equitable society as a whole. You all must be aware of the NFHS 5 data. So I will just quickly go through that. First, you know, the sex, I mean, we have been doing something good. The sex ratio has improved from 991 to 2020. There's decline in early marriage from 26.8 to 23.3. There is decrease in teenage pregnancy from 7.9 to 6.8. I've just highlighted this data to point out that any change in health indices of adolescent takes a decade. So a lot of investment has to be sustained, has to keep going on. It should not be a one-off intervention or a one-off program. So if we have this background, what should we do? So I would quickly try and say what I thought we should be doing as a program. First, of course, that whether it is the government bodies, whether it is the civil society organizations, whether it is the our partner agencies, we have to look at not just the short-term responses, but the long-term responses also from any intervention which we are planning and implementing in the field. Second, I would say that we have to prioritize resilience and address the key bottlenecks which have already been informed to us through our program implementation. So if you address these issues, maybe we look at a stronger program implementation. And third, I would say that we have to have some kind of strategic public investment which ensures access to quality of services, is gender responsive, helps us monitor the interventions with a gender lens. It helps us to plan to advance girls more in our programs. It helps in delivery of social protection and safety net programs, and also has intersectoral coordination for any intervention which we are planning. And of course, as per the last session, which was there, of course, the community outreach, which is a huge, huge intervention, which we have to strengthen and work on. So we also know that taking cognizance of what has been happening earlier, Government of India already is implementing. You may be aware of the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, which is a three-pronged approach. I will try not to repeat, facility-based, community-based, and school-based, which I think all of you are quite aware. So that has already been taking part. Besides that, which was just mentioned, is the Ayushman Bharat School Health and Wellness Program. So this is program which I would beg to differ with my colleague who's here, who mentioned that teachers should be used only for education. We in the health, and in fact, with coordination with the Ministry of Education, we are training a lot of teachers to talk about health. Because I think as a program planner, you do realize that children spend 7 to 8 hours in school. And if these teachers become the nodal person of sharing the correct information of health, this will go a far, far long way than expecting these children to actually come to a health institution and ask for services. So under this umbrella, we have trained our teachers on 11 themes. More than 1.2 lakh teachers have already been trained. And just to share with you, it's just such an enthusiastic group. When we interact with the states, the teachers are feeling so interested because this is outside what they have been doing. This is not a part in which they're getting any extra pay, but the sheer passion of learning new things, of even changing the knowledge which they had. So that is something which is pushing a lot of our teachers, and we have got such positive feedback from the state. So right now it is now being implemented in about 130 districts. 146 in fact districts, but this is going to be expanded across all the states, all districts, because of the positive feedback which we have got from all the states. So this is something which is very strong for our government. And I would, not taking too much of time, I would just throw out 5-6 points, which I would say is how do we help and develop strategy which will help us build a better and more equal world for our girls. First, of course, is through collective action and strong advocacy. Advocacy is something which we have to build on, a continuous advocacy with various stakeholders, whether it is the ministries, whether it is the parents, whether it is the schools, whether it is, I would say, even the community and the NGOs. When we look at funding, the more we advocate for health of girls, young girls, the more funding and the more continuity of programs will happen. Second, I would say it has to be intergenerational ownership. It should just not, the adolescents should not feel it's our program. Their parents should feel involved. The grandparents should feel involved. So whenever that ownership, that awareness is there, the uptake is very good. So you have to have that ownership of involving parents. And that is one very important thing which we have put in a school program, is to train the teacher to interact with parents. So whenever there is a parent-teacher association, the teacher will talk to parents to inform them what the importance of adolescent health, so that every parent is aware that the growing children need help, need support, and need understanding also. Third point I would say is that intersectoral, which has already been discussed, but just to put it again out there, is that we need education, we need health, we need law, we need youth and sports. We need all ministries to work together. It should not be just a health program or an education program. So as the ownership increases, so the visibility will increase, so the, I think, funding will increase, so the awareness within the community will also increase. Fourth, I would say any action we plan should be sustained. It should not be a one-off intervention, should not be one program, something which, as the data you all are aware, took almost a decade to show any change in adolescent health indicators. So we have to keep sustaining. If the evidence is right, the outcome is also going to be right. And last, of course, is adequate funding. I mean, it all boils down to money. So if we have sustained adequate funding, I don't see why we cannot truly transform our programs to be more gender sensitive, more pro-girls, so that we don't let them actually stay back after this COVID pandemic. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoa. Very practical, implementable, and sustainable way forward. So glad you are leading this particular program in the ministry. And now I request Dr. Shri Saurabh Rishi, Senior Specialist Niti Aayog, to kindly give his remarks.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, respected chair, panelists, and good afternoon to the participants. So we have heard most of the experts speak already. So I'll take this opportunity to highlight some of the key learnings that we have had from the aspirational districts program and some action points that can be included in the action plan for this event. So as we know, the aspirational districts program was initiated to fast track progress in the most backward districts of the country through convergence of central and state schemes, through collaboration with the district administration, the state machinery, the civil society organizations, and finally competition through constant monitoring and follow-up on various KPIs. So the aspirational districts program focuses on a lot of indicators related to nutrition, health, and education. For example, we constantly track the sanitation facilities in school for the girl child, female literacy, what is the improvement at the district level, of course, malnutrition, supplementary nutrition, whether regular supply has been provided by the district administration to the families or not. So these are some things that we constantly track. And my first key takeaway from this program is the changing role of the district administration itself. In the sense that from the traditional role of, let's say, law and order and planning and development, the role now is also changing towards the social development of various with respect to health, nutrition, and agriculture. And secondly, as Zoya ma'am also highlighted, the changing role of the teacher itself, not only highlighted for the education, but also towards health and nutrition. And thirdly, the changing role of even the staff in Anganwadis, wherein their role not only as providers of nutrition, but also as education and what we have been hearing in the last few conversations that provide moral support and guidance on social issues very early on in the girl's life. Right. So this is the first key takeaway. And for this, the participation or collaboration with the civil society organization with district administration becomes very important. And I would like to highlight one of the articles that CEO has recently written, CEO Niti Aayog, on how do we bring back the girl child, because we have seen a rise in the dropouts post the pandemic. And of course, there are various reasons that we are aware of, the social reasons, but post pandemic, there are other reasons that have come into force where the girl has had to take up a job or work at home. And the article talks about what are the various ways that we can get the girl child back into school. And one program that Niti Aayog has initiated is the Sarvam Bitiya Shiksha Abhiyan, which is basically in partnership with a civil society organization, which works at the district level on various interventions on this particular aspect. The second thing I would like to highlight is as we have seen in the NFHS results, while many of the indicators have improved, anemia is a cause of concern. And so targeted interventions for anemia, again, Niti Aayog has taken up this under the platform of Anemia Mukt Bharat. We are trying to focus at the district level along with civil society organizations to target this problem, not only from the demand side, increasing the awareness, but also on the supply side, the supply chain issues of availability of IFA tablets and so on and so forth. Some of the other things that would be very useful is that another initiative that Niti Aayog has taken up is the setting up of a behavioral insight unit. Again, as I was discussing with respect to anemia, the role of this unit is not only to identify the challenges with respect to the demand side, the awareness, the social issues, but also target the supply side, right? Work with the Anganwadi centers, work with the ASHA, the ANMs, and identify how they can increase the outreach of these awareness programs or these to the beneficiaries at the ground level. And lastly, I would like to talk about the other things that the article talks about. Again, this is what Zoya ma'am mentioned, that the funding bit. So there has been the Gender Inclusion Fund, which is part of the new education policy, which can be made, that can be utilized to its full benefit. The second is revival of the national scheme, which incentivizes girls in secondary education. So these two things can be explored to bridge the gaps in funding. And lastly, the action plan should include a targeted action plan for focus groups, in the sense that we have seen that obviously there are indicators of social cues across geographies or demographics. But if you can focus on targeted focus groups, let's say Assam tea workers, what kind of livelihoods they lead, what kind of challenges do they have, right? Or similarly, we have a Vandhan Yojana that targets basically livelihoods and increasing female labor force participation, right? So these things also can be utilized to build this targeted action plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saurabh. And now I move to Mr. Parul Soni, founder and global managing director, Think Through Consulting, to give his insights.
Thank you, ma'am. I think from last 2 days, you have been working towards this national plan, which talks about quality education, gender equality, mental well-being, and gender-based violence in terms of how should we look at. If we go back to our constitution, and I think Justice Lokar must have spoken about it, that the citizens of India have got this entire thinking that they will get the benefit of the constitution to say, and defining the citizens as such. Why I'm taking you back 75 years is because we have to draw that thinking that when the forefathers of our constitution wrote the constitution, they thought about each citizens, and each citizens per se was defined as children and men and women as such. The thinking behind was that after 75 years of independence, I think we should be, and we have to be, in a position where we should talk about how we will create an enabling environment for children as such. My thinking is a bit different, that what we are doing, we are working, we are sitting here with Plan International, which is world's one of the largest organization working for children, and I am also on the board of Save the Children and many other organizations as such. What is happening is, I think we have to, when we are creating a national plan, we have to not only take into consideration all the aspects of children, and especially girl children. We have to talk about the whole aspect that how should we live and inculcate the habit and inculcate the whole understanding, starting from the communities, and communities definitely are families. Also looking at the social norms, the adults and girls, exposures to vulnerabilities, and many other things which we are talking about, this entire thinking of bringing that kind of change. So one is what I feel, we have a lot of institutions, but one institution which is missing is the whole well-being of children as an institution. I'm not talking about NCPCR and others. We have a lot of institutions which are talking about whole thinking about protection of children. Why are we talking about protection? Because we feel the protection is in danger, and children are in danger as such, because there are vulnerabilities. But we have to speak, as my colleagues spoke about, the whole village, panchayat, block, district, state, and country. But I think the time has come when we need a very large national plan. As we have a national budget, we should have a national plan for children. And I think organizations like Plan International should start a multi-sectoral approach where all the right key stakeholders, including the government. We were talking about Niti Aayog, which also is government. I'm saying government, private sector, not-for-profit organization, academic institutions like the Delhi University and all should come together and create a board structure and start discussing about how this entire next 5 years will go. Definitely COVID has pushed children to a place where they are struggling to survive, struggling to think that education will be a dream, I can say now, because of the thing that 2 years they have not gone to school as such. But what we need in the national plan is a more dedicated process and dedicated organization which should talk about the development of children. But it should not be a government body. what I'm saying, because government bodies have been created. There are a lot of these institutions which exist in the districts, at the state level, at the central level, but the thinking is that multi-stakeholder institution, which should be for the children, for the benefit of the children, should be created. So that's first, I can say, the action plan which I've heard, and the thinking which is coming on that. That action plan and that institution should have different variety of different modules, and the models which should be there. For example, we are talking about children who are 0 to 4 years. What is the need in that? The needs are very, very different than when we are talking about adolescents and other, age group. Then 4 to 9, the needs are very, very different. 9 to 14 needs are different. We are talking about life skill education. We're talking about body mapping, many other things which, if you look at the rural India or in different parts of the world, it's sometimes difficult to see that, how things really work at that level. I can also comment that if you look at adolescent health, our focus has not been that much that, we have to bring that kind of a very, very focused approach on adolescent and adolescent health as such. Then we are talking about, 18 to 24, where young adults, young women, young, girls, and talking about what they need. Today, the need is also different, because the thing is that education is definitely important. Skill development is important. Entrepreneurship is important. So we have to have that kind of thinking on that, plan as such. All this should come into an ecosystem. My main take on this is that, when we talk about government's intervention, government is very, very important, and government has to participate in the whole thinking about bringing that change. But my feeling is individual level change or individual level participation is missing. When we talk about corporate responsibility, we still miss the whole thinking about individual responsibility to bringing that change. Families are very, very important. And the other thing which I've heard is the whole aspect about, when we're talking about food, shelter, education, life skills, the whole personality development and making children confident is important. With my work, I have traveled across the world, and I have seen some of the countries where children are so confident. When I travel in India with my work and I meet a lot of children, I feel that there are somewhere the families are putting them down, not encouraging them to live their life as they should lead their life. And this is not a rural phenomenon. This is also happening in Delhi, which is very, very urban as such, because we feel that, if they participate, they have nothing to say. I think we should start listening to children more. They have the right and they have the whole thinking. And today they are maturing much faster. They have the know-how. They are on the internet highway. And if you look at internet from a positive perspective, I think those things were important as such. But putting this all in a perspective of a national plan, I must say that, plan today as an organization is in a right frame, and it can partner with various institutions, private, government and international institutions, to see if we can create a larger, bigger plan. And when we talk about plan comes into play, is that this plan should be more as a national plan, and we should break the boundaries of other organizations. We should not look at competition as competition. We should look as competition as collaboration, and that should be the take from that perspective. That's the point which I wanted to put from the perspective of collaboration and creating a national plan per se. The second perspective is the measurement. Now, for example, what is happening is we have so many schemes, we have so many organizations working across India, but we don't have a repository of those work. We have Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao, definitely a large, big scheme working, and I should commend and also congratulate ma'am. Under her leadership, lot has been done as such. But the thinking is that, there are a lot of these small schemes, I can tell you, but a lot of money being spent, but we don't have a repository of those, works which are happening by the corporate sector, by others as such, in bringing that kind of change, that what has really worked as such. And that's also creates the whole islands of success as such. The other thing is that when we create a platform like this, I think funding will not be a problem, because when we think big, when we think larger, I think a lot of participation comes in, and the participation will come, but somebody has to, put the right foot forward to bring that kind of change as such. The other thing is the whole thinking about cross-sectoral. I think what our panelists and also the chairs spoke about, multi-stakeholder platforms and the multi-sectoral alliance, which we are talking about, the national organization per se. But government has to be in the referee role, not as a commanding role in this. And that's, I wanted to be very, very clear on this. And the last 3 points which I wanted to say, that these organization at the national plan, if we create, I think we should really focus on the whole aspect about what kind of advocacy, what kind of campaigns we will build, and what campaigns and advocacy we will run from this entire perspective of bringing that change. That's one. The second is the implementation has to be done by expert organizations. This organization has to be an organization of repute and a kind of a torchbearer organization, which should start implementing through organizations which are in rural India, but selected properly and work properly as such. And the third is basically looking at what kind of peer-to-peer, knowledge sharing has to be done. So this is what I feel, if you look at from the perspective of summing up from this large convention which you have done, I think somewhere the recommendation has to, and the plan can take the lead of bringing that kind of change and bringing that perspective, that and a recommendation where government should participate and should be part of it, but not in a controlling position as such. And definitely that is where the companies, the corporate sector, the academy and everyone will come in this plan, and we should look at from a larger, bigger perspective as such. Sorry, I am always thinking from a larger, bigger thinking. So I feel that we have institutions, but this can be an aggregation, an aggregate institution at a national level. India is a federal country. We have state level institution, but somebody has to think on a larger thing. Funding is not a problem. I can tell you that funding is available, but somewhere we have to tap the funding, and this institution can bring large, big benefits for our children. And children are really suffering, and children really are in the need to really come out and become confident individual, confident citizens of this country. If they will not, we will see this country going really down from that perspective, because we have an aging population now. We had the benefit of young population, and now we have an issue of aging population in this country. So the benefit of children, if we don't catch them young, we will be in real trouble in the time to come. Thank you.
So thank you, Soni. You very rightly said that collaboration is actually the key, and documenting diverse interventions and best practices is required. And I also request you to go through the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao portal, which documents best practices of the states, so that there's flexibility. And I think the same flex be here also, and the urgency that you have spoken about. If we don't invest in our children, in our adolescents, in our girls now, we will see the consequences that we will be sorry for. I think it's a clarion call. So now I think over to Anushri to conduct rest of the program. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'm just concluding a very enriching 2 days with the vote of thanks to everyone. It's my pleasure to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of Plan India on the concluding day of this fourth national conference, Plan for Every Child 2021. To begin with, I'm grateful to MS Rathi Vinay Jha, former Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, for providing the content during the 2 days. I would also like to express our appreciation for Sri Ram Haridas, Representative India and Country Director Bhutan, United Nations Population Fund, who highlighted the inequities faced by girls and women, specifically in the domain of health and workplace, and suggested action points for promoting equality using a powerful gender lens. Special thanks to Dr. Dhyaneshwar Manohar Mule, member, National Human Rights Commission, for his encouraging inaugural address, where he focused on changing the attitude as a first step towards building back better with girls. We are also thankful to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management, for his inspirational speech, where he emphasized that all girls need to be made confident, to be able to dream without any limitation, to be able to achieve greater heights. I would like to thank all the honorable chairs on the dais for both the, and who are not here, for both the plenary and thematic sessions. And Ms. Upma Chaudhary, ex-Union Secretary, Government of India and Director, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. Mr. Atul Dhawan, Chairperson, Deloitte India. Honorable Justice Madan B. Lokur, former Judge, Supreme Court of India. Sri JVR Prasada Rao, former Health Secretary, Minister of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Dr. Sanjay Bhatt, Professor, Delhi School of Social Work, University of Delhi. Dr. Indra Chakravarti, Padma Shri and Public Health Specialist. Ms. Preeti Sudan, former Secretary, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Dr. Renu Golwarkar, Director, Gender, Youth and Social Inclusion and Gender Health, who blessed us with their presence. Thank you for your dedication, adding depth to the deliberations and steering the sessions to ensure we at Plan India now have concrete recommendations to follow through. I'm grateful to all the speakers for their time and for sharing their expertise and experience and engaging in fruitful, constructive and open exchanges throughout the 2 days of the conference. Thanks to our program teams in Uttarakhand, Delhi, Telangana and Bihar to facilitate sessions with the young girls, which help in further enriching the discussions. Special thanks to the young girls for waiting patiently to share their thoughts and participating enthusiastically in the discussions. I would like to acknowledge the contributions of Dr. Zoya Ali Rizvi, Deputy Commissioner, Adolescent Health, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Shri Saurabh Rishi, Senior Specialist, Niti Aayog. Mr. Parul Soni, Founder and Global Managing Partner, Think Through Consulting, for providing recommendations to build back better, more inclusive and equal communities by placing the girls at the center. Along with the Plan India team, I'm sure that all our participants who are joining online have taken note of your suggestions and will be discussing within their organization the actions to be initiated at their level to build back better with girls. I'm thankful to all the online participants, both in person and specifically those joining online, for participating enthusiastically in these 2 days of the conference. A huge thanks to the technological company here for their technical support to enable us to organize this conference in an innovative hybrid model and for seamlessly connecting all the online chairs, speakers, and participants. Thanks are also due to the staff of Park Hotel for the venue and other logistical support. A conference of this dimension and scale cannot be implemented single-handedly. My deep regards and sincere thanks to members of the Plan India board for their constant words of encouragement, support, and attention to make this conference a success. I'm grateful to Mohammad Asif, Executive Director, Plan India, and the Plan India's country management team for the stewardship, guidance, and support in planning and organizing this 4th National Conference on Plan for Every Child. Above and beyond, let me not forget the backbone of this event. The teams which you have seen and who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the conference runs smoothly. Our communication team, our program implementation team, the IT team, the human resources, procurement and administrative teams, and the finance team. Thank you for your support. Without you, this conference would not have been possible. Lastly, but not the least, thanks to the Plan for Every Child coordination team, including the 2 interns who worked hard and went an extra mile to ensure the success of the conference. I sincerely apologize if I have left out anybody in this long list. Once again, thank you, everyone.